What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Election Hour, and I got a special one for you right now. We all know for the majority of states, if they're going to go left, if they're going to go right, if they're going to go blue, if they're going to go red. So right now, I thought we would focus on the most important states, at least in my mind. Now, I try to take my bias out of it. I try to get strictly down to what the polls say and weigh them with their bias. But today, we're going to go over Nevada, Arizona, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Georgia, North Carolina, and even New Jersey and maybe New Hampshire. But New Jersey, that might be a surprise to you guys, but I'll let you know in a second why I think that. Okay, so actually where we're going to start is a surprise state. Okay, Virginia all of a sudden is now in play, and no, I am not kidding. Now, when it comes to polls, I want you guys to remember this one thing. Rasmussen polls are the best. They literally get it the closest every time. Some people say, oh, it's the only right-leaning poll. No, it's the only poll that doesn't have a left bias. Think about it that way. And so as of right now in Virginia, we're only down by 3. That's in the margin of error. And when I say we, I mean Trump. He's only down by 3 points, which is in the margin of error. Now, I just watched the Rasmussen Reports channel, and he even confirmed that this 3 points, he weighted a little low, and that it definitely is within the margin of error. And that if Trump does perform well, especially with the popular vote, it could easily go to Trump. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to mark it likely blue for Kamala. Okay, so like I said, we are going to mark Virginia likely blue for Kamala. Now, and I'm telling you, I honestly think Trump can win. And I'm not going to tell you guys who I want to win, because I just want to know who you want to win. So whoever you want to win, let me know right now in the comments so I know what my audience likes. And while you're at it, real quick, 99.999% of you guys have not subscribed to the channel, because this is a new channel. So if you can subscribe and hit that like button, right now is the time to do it. Okay, but when it comes to Virginia, let's not forget that a poll just last week came out with them tied. And honestly, I think it is heads or tails right now. I legitimately think it's a coin flip. So I guess we'll see what happens. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to give it to Kamala Harris. Okay, so to continue things, we're going to go with the Sun Belt on the west coast of the United States. We're going to take a look at Nevada and Arizona right now. And it's looking a lot better for Trump than it did a couple weeks ago. Let's take a look. Okay, so if we take a look at Nevada, we can see here that things are pretty close, okay? I mean, these are all within the last week or two, and you can see Harris +1, tie, Harris +1, Harris +1, and then, of course, Bloomberg. Please never listen to a Bloomberg poll. They're always off by at least 8 points. It says +7. Come on. And then the last poll that came out, yes, Rasmussen, the most dependable pollster there is, and they have Trump up 1. And like I said, I just watched the Rasmussen reports for this week. If you haven't watched them, I highly encourage you to go check them out on Rasmussen YouTube. But this is kind of weighed low too, because I've been watching a bunch of independent journalists, and they have gone to the heart of Nevada. And I'd say over 60% of them, the people that were being interviewed, say they're going to vote for Trump. And this was in multiple different areas. So keep your eye open. This one's going to go in the tilt for Trump. All right. Like I said, this one's going to go in the tilt for Trump, Nevada. Okay, we're going to get it all the way in the tilt. Now let's see where we're at now. We are at Trump with 225 electoral votes and Kamala Harris at 198. So Kamala, if you haven't heard, her new theory is to kind of abandon Pennsylvania, and she thinks that she can actually win North Carolina and Georgia. So definitely stick around, because we'll be getting to those real soon. But right now, let's figure out Arizona. Now, just to let you guys know, I am on Real Clear Politics, but I think 270 to win actually has a very intuitive interface if you want to look at their state races, and some polls are up there that are not on here, so it's actually a great place to look. But as we look in Arizona, which, you know, this state Trump lost in 2020 by a thread as well, we can see that just within the last week, we have Trump 2, Harris 3 by Bloomberg. There we go. Trump 1, Trump 3, Trump 6 by USA Today Suffolk. Okay, that is a little weird, because they are slightly left as well. Fox, of course, Fox News TV is usually good to the right, but for some reason their polls are really left lately, and so they even have Trump up. So that tells me that Trump is up at least 5 points in Arizona, maybe even 7. And I think that's eventually what it'll be. It'll be a 5 to 7 point race. So let's turn that into a likely for Donald Trump. So with that being a likely for Donald Trump, or a lean for Donald Trump, lean, likely, kind of the same thing, just separated by a few points. We got now Republicans at 236, Democrats are at the same. Okay, and now we're going to get to what people thought was the most important state just only a week ago, and that was Pennsylvania. Let's see where things are at now. Okay, so I had to go back a week to find the Rasmussen reports, and it was tied. And as you can see, most of these are tied, except for a couple. But the last one was tied as well, and that was by Fox News, which I know people might not understand this, but even though they are a right-leaning organization when it comes to their pollsters, they are notoriously left. If you don't believe me, you can just pull up 2020 or 2016, and you will see they're always left by a couple points. So even though this says tied, if you actually go into the crosstabs on the Rasmussen polls, you can actually see that Trump is widening his lead from what was a 1 to 2 point and now is about a 2 to 3 point lead. Okay, but for the purposes of this video, to be fair, it's a tie, so we are actually not going to mark it at all. Now, mind you, how things really are, I really would give this a tilt, if not a lean, to Donald Trump right now. But like I said, we're going to stay objective, we're going to stay fair. So Pennsylvania right now is just going to remain in the toss-up category. So let's move on to the blue wall. I mean, the blue wall forever has been Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and you can even throw Minnesota in there. I mean, when Trump won them in 2016, except for Minnesota, which he almost won, he won the election. But then when he lost Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania in 2020, he lost the election. So let's start off with Minnesota and Wisconsin. Now, Minnesota, for those of you who don't know, is Kamala Harris's vice presidential running mate, Tim Walz. So she gains a little bit of ground right there just from that. But as we can see here, there's two pollsters that are not really, we can't really trust them, the +5 and the +6. So if you look at Minnesota on the Rasmussen reports, it's only a 3-point lead for Harris. Now, why is this important? This is important because that's within the margin of error. And this is in the most Democratic state of the blue wall by far, Minnesota. I don't think they have voted Republican in over 50 years. So for it to be in the margin of error, and remember, when it comes to polling, and we'll get into this in a later episode, Trump, his polls always seem to go up towards the end of October all the way into November. So this is a state to really keep an eye on, but for right now, it's going to lean for Harris. Okay, so we finally got another Harris on the board right here, and it is going to lean towards her. So now she is at 208 versus Trump, which is at 236. Okay, now let's go to Wisconsin. Now, Wisconsin, there's actually been a decent amount of polls within the last 2 weeks. And as you can see, it started off by, Harris +2. But if you look at Quinnipiac, which is very far left-leaning poll, they only had her up by 1. And then another one, and then another one. And then The Hill got Trump up by 1, so things are starting to turn. And then it was a tie, and then Bloomberg, of course, Harris +3, and of course, New York Times Siena says that Harris is up 2. Now, let me tell you something about New York Times and Siena. They usually are wrong by in between anywhere from 3 to 8 points. But I will give them this. For this election cycle over the last especially 3 weeks, they've seemed a lot more accurate. But when you look at this, we can look at Rasmussen, and it says it's a tie. And when you look into the crosstabs, it's actually trending more towards Trump. And mind you, that was only like 5 days ago, not even. So I would say this is actually a tilt for Donald Trump, but we're trying to keep things accurate just for what they are this time on the map, right? We'll do other ones where it's going to be with our gut and our thoughts and the crosstabs and all of that, but right now we're going to keep it straight up for Harris. And here we go. This one's going to be just a tilt. Okay, so now it's 218 to 236. It's getting tight. And Michigan, here we go. Now, if a lot of you were paying attention to the Michigan polls even just a month ago, Harris was up by 5, 6, and 7. And as you can see, that lead has dropped. I mean, Bloomberg only has them up by 3. That should tell you guys where Michigan really is at. I believe Michigan right now is at least 2 points for Donald Trump. But the last 2 reports were New York Times Siena, which has Harris up by 1, and Rasmussen, which has it a tie. And I looked into the crosstabs of Rasmussen, and I'm just going to say it's good news for Donald Trump. But like I said, I was going to keep everything fair and honest on this. And even though when you look into the crosstabs of the New York Times and Siena, it's actually like a 0.6 lead. It's not even a point. As much as I want to put this in the toss-up, I have to put it tilt for Harris. So that's exactly what we are going to do. We are going to put this tilt for Harris. Now, I want you to remember, though, everything that's tilt for Harris on this board is probably going to be Trump by in between 1 to 3 points. When it comes to Wisconsin, probably 2 or 3 points. Michigan, same, probably 2 points. But Pennsylvania, I'm telling you, it's going to be by 3 or 4 points. But let's move on. First, we're going to zoom in right here to New Jersey. And while I am going to give this to Kamala Harris, believe it or not, I'm only going to give it a tilt. I'm going to tell you why there has not been a lot of polls coming out of New Jersey. Now, if you know anything about the New York poll that came out and said New York was up by 14 points, well, people on X that actually do the accountability thing to make sure the polls are fair saw that it actually took 50% of Democrats in while only taking in about 30% of Republicans. So if you skew that, it means that New York is only up by about 4 points for Harris. That's right near the margin of error, which means Trump could actually take New York. I'm not joking. And guess what? If New York goes, New Jersey's going to go too. And a lot of people seem to forget that he was up in New Jersey by 2 points a month ago. But of course, now you can't find those polls anywhere, and they're not doing any more. I wonder why that is. So I honestly think that New Jersey is in play. But like I said, for this, we're going to keep it as a tilt, just because there's no data out there really. And just to give you guys a quick example about how the New York Times Siena polls can be somewhat accurate, but usually they're off by at least 4 points. If you look at Ohio right here, it has Trump up by 6. I live in Ohio. I can personally tell you that Trump is going to win the Buckeye State by more than 10 points. And Iowa is probably going to follow suit. A lot of people think Iowa is more Republican than Ohio, but it's actually not. I wouldn't be surprised if he wins by over 12 points. But just to show you some of the bias, I thought I would bring this up. Now, when it comes to New Hampshire, we only have one poll by UNH, which is extremely, and I mean extremely, left-leaning, and they have Harris up by 11. And if you look at New Hampshire, she only has an 89% chance to win. Now, I know a lot of you will think that's a lot, but you got to remember, when Hillary Clinton ran, Trump almost won the state. He lost by about 0.3 percentage points. So even though it seems New Hampshire is far out there, I'd say, in all honesty, he's probably only down by about 3 points, which makes that close to a toss-up. So that's another state we got to keep an eye on. But for the purposes of this episode, we will give it to Harris. And these are the odds on Polymarket. Okay, so we're going to actually make that a lean for New Hampshire. Okay, so now we are at 251 versus 296. Now, if you notice right now, if the map did play out this way, where Kamala Harris won Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and Virginia, and not to mention held on to New York, New Jersey, and New Hampshire, she's only 19 electoral votes away. And what has 19 electoral votes? Pennsylvania. So it's definitely her way to the White House. But now we are going to the Sun Belt, the two states that are hot topics right now. Kamala Harris thinks that she actually is going to lose Pennsylvania as well. She even has taken money out of her campaigns and has started putting them in North Carolina. She really thinks she can win North Carolina and Georgia. But I'm going to tell you why this is going to be extremely hard. Well, usually Georgia is actually more to the right than North Carolina, even though it was flipped last year, I think by the smallest percentage of like about 0.4%. Okay, North Carolina went for Trump in 2016 and 2020. So let's dive into it. Okay, so as you can see, the last 3 polls have been a tie, and then Trump up 3 and Trump up 1. Now, we got Rasmussen right there, and that's about what it is for North Carolina. Trump is up 3 to 4 points right now, maybe even up 5. So he is definitely going to take the Tar Heel state. To be honest, I don't know why she really thinks she can win the Tar Heel state, but the polls would disagree with her, and I think that might be, in hindsight for her, a horrible choice to kind of pull out of Pennsylvania. Okay, so as we can see now, it is ridiculously close. It is Trump at 252 electorals versus Kamala Harris at 251. They are separated by a point. So it's time to go on down to Georgia. Now, as you can tell, in Georgia, it's been all Trump. And if we look up to the last polls, we have Trump up by 4 by New York Times Siena. This is where New York Times Siena is actually getting it correct, because Rasmussen has them at 3, but they even say they downplayed it a little bit as well. So Trump is really up about 4 points right now in Georgia. So we are going to now fill Georgia in for Donald Trump. And we will keep that right now as a lean, because it is pretty strong in the way that he's going to win. So what do we have right now? If we do not put Pennsylvania into the map, and if Kamala Harris wins Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, she is at still 251, while Donald Trump is at 268, which means if Donald Trump was to get Virginia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, or Minnesota, then he wins the presidency. And in this scenario, the only hope that Kamala Harris has is to win Pennsylvania. So by doing that and kind of doing the math in my head, I would put the odds of Trump winning by the Electoral College right now at approximately 77%. Now, I will keep you guys updated every single day and let you know if anything changes with the polls. This is Election Hour. Thank you guys so much for watching this first video. I'll see you next time.